everyone to the Social Dig, the greatest underrated show on the World Wide Web. I am your host, Mr. Rob G, and as always, we're going to be digging into the topics that keep you talking and the talk that keeps you thinking. So come on in, kick your feet up, get an ice cold beverage or a warm beverage, and get ready to join the conversation. Back here at the Social Dig, I just, man, feels like I'm back home again, home away from home, right? Totally glad to be back in the building here, episode number 3, season 2. We're going to go ahead and get into some real good topics tonight. Catastrophic disclosure. What would be the government's plan, right? So we know what they want. We know how they want to try to, run the program with controlled disclosure, which could take 100 years, 1,000 years. Really, truthfully, it may never come if we leave it up to that. So if it went away from government's plan and it jumped into a catastrophic disclosure, what would they do? That's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to go ahead and look at some possible scenarios. Let me go ahead and jump in the chat, just see who is here. I know Ann Joanne came in last night. She came bright and early. Thanks for coming on in, Ann Joanne. We got Eternity. Let me get Ann Joanne. We got Eternity Eternal, who has stepped in the building saying hi, Rob G. We got Annie Perry saying hi, Robbie from the UK. We got Magneticus saying, why so early in the afternoon? I know, it's doing something a little different, right? Not everything related to this topic has to be at night or in the evening, right? Let's kind of spread it around the day, right? Get you fresh before the day has consumed you. So thanks for coming on in, Magneticus. Fast Hemi has stepped in the building saying, hello, Mr. G. Hey, Fast Hemi, thanks for coming in. We do appreciate you. And yeah, so, we had some mishaps here. I know some programs showed that they were going to start, and then, it was delayed. So I know we're going to have to catch up on that. And I know people will slowly trickle in as we go ahead and get into this topic today. So just so glad to be back. Cosby Joe Chronicles stepped in. Thank you for coming on in tonight, Cosby Joe Chronicles. Yeah, it's one of those conversations, right? So you look over at Spaced Out Radio, which I'm there every weekend, which is, we just ran a show where I had some really weird stuff happen. I won't really touch too much on that here today, but if you go to Spaced Out Radio after hours, actually, I released a shortened, edited video of that after hour 3 where these orbs appeared. Literally triggered the camera, these orbs appeared, and I showed the evidence. Make sure you guys go and watch that. But what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and get into some real good stuff here, kind of just jog your brain, right? Because it's the talk to keep the conversation that keeps you talking, the talk that keeps you thinking, right? And that's what we do here. So I'm just so glad to be back in the building. Welcome to the Social Dig. Let's go ahead and get into it. So a lot of news has been happening around ufology, and there's some things, right, that we're going to cover in the news today that I've been saying some of these things for literally the last year. So, and we're going to touch on some of that and, see where we're at. Check the barometer, see how disclosure feels. Is it heating up? I don't really know. But I do know that some things have developed within the last month that I think kind of shakes up the whole field. So we will go ahead and jump into that. Without further delay, I want to go ahead and jump into what we call This Week in Disclosure News. You guys kick back and let's get into it. In disclosure news, and actually before we jump into the news, I want to go ahead and make sure that I talk to Ask the Chat. We have a segment where you will hear this.
Ask the Chat.
And it usually poses a question for the audience. So that way you can interact and kind of join the conversation as well. Also, as you see on the screen, you can post a response to the questions or the live chat or the call by calling the call-in line or message line, which is 856-843-3444, or that is 856 the dig 24-hour line. You can call at any time and leave a message. You can leave a voicemail just to say hey. You can leave a voicemail with your experience. You can send text messages. You can send me pictures if you have caught a sighting. You have something interesting that you want to show. You can definitely go ahead and send it over to that number. So make sure this number is in your phone book. Put this in your contact list. That way, when you do need it, it's right there. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into the news because there's a few things I did want to cover. Some of the main things, right, is disclosure heating up. One of the stories we're going to cover is Kirkpatrick lied. Imagine that. Kirkpatrick lied. But I think we all knew that, right? I think we all knew that there were lies being told based on our own experiences and what we know about the phenomenon. We know it's out there. So we'll be talking about that. We'll get into that in the news today. Also, Lou Elizondo's emails, right, confirm that he had dealings with A-Tip. This has been the skeptical argument for the last 2 years, right? A lot of those channels out there try to debunk Lou Elizondo and try to poke holes. And I think they spend a lot of time doing that. But there's a contrast here, right? Because if you do it to him, do it to Kirkpatrick. So we'll go ahead and get into that. Plus, we have another random news story. So we'll jump right into this. So there was a sighting recently in New York. Everyone knows about this, but I kind of wanted, since we haven't been here for a while, we'll go ahead and cover this. So the way this runs, and actually I have the story here. I want to go ahead and bring it up. But this young lady here, Michelle Reyes, was on a flight into LaGuardia Airport in New York and ended up, I guess she was taking video out the window, and she caught this disc. What looks like a disc, I mean, you could potentially call it a cylinder. I guess it depends on how you look at it. I wonder if you turned it a little bit, would it have, would it be a circular shape, or would it be simply a cylinder? I don't really know. But I think the image is pretty clear and it's kind of undeniable. And once again, as we talked about on Spaced Out Radio, we're having these UFOs or UAPs, if whatever you want to call them, getting close to these commercial jets. And which is and here's the thing, right? You should definitely, it is a thing because we see it. So with these things up there like that, coming so close to these commercial planes, you have to ask yourself, would there at some point in the future be some sort of interaction between these crafts and these planes, right? They seem to trail them. There was a video that had come out within ufology last week where there was airplane taking off from an airport in Las Vegas, and it showed clear as day, 2 UAPs following it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I did, I think the people on the plane, had they known that this would be a thing, that they would have these things following them, would they have boarded the plane? Right. So I think it's just really one of those reasons why, the government shows in so many ways that they may not care too much about public safety when it comes to these things. So maybe they know something we don't know. Maybe they know that these things won't do anything. But I can tell you, let's go ahead and get a closer look at this. I'm going to read the story from it because I actually have it here. Let me get that up here for you guys, and I'll jump into the story. So, possible UFO over New York City baffles passenger flying into LaGuardia. An airplane passenger took flying saucer speculation to new heights when she spotted a possible UFO soaring above the Big Apple, baffling experts and sending federal aviation officials on a fact-finding mission Thursday. Michelle Reyes was on a commercial airline flight above LaGuardia Airport on March 25th when she captured video footage of a mysterious, quote, flying cylinder out of her plane window, she said on Facebook. Quote, the first thing I did was email the FAA to let them know what I saw, she told News Nation Wednesday. And then, quote, maybe it was a safety hazard, but unfortunately, I haven't heard back from them. They didn't acknowledge my email. She said another person on the flight saw the out of this world object and was stunned. Quote from that person says, it's a little nerve wracking that someone else saw what I saw, she said. Thomas Wortman, the state director of the Mutual UFO Network in Ohio, reviewed the footage for the Post and said the dark object, which I'll go ahead and zoom in on for you here. The dark object was traveling at roughly 2,500 feet and was, quote, relatively close to the plane as it prepared for landing. The object's altitude, shape, and location near a major commercial flight path appears to rule out that it could be a news helicopter, a drone, or military aircraft, Wortman said. Quote from Wortman says, drones aren't supposed to fly at that altitude, at least legally, he said. If it were something related to military defense or law enforcement, you normally wouldn't see it so close to a major flight lane. That could be a potential hazard, said Wortman, who has spent years studying the skies for evidence of interplanetary visitors. The unusual round shape of the object struck him as intriguing because it debunks the theory that it was a second plane filmed at an odd angle. It does not appear to be a commercial aircraft because I do not see features like wings or a tail. The plane Reyes was aboard was roughly 15 minutes away from LaGuardia Airport, likely traveling at 230 miles per hour when the video was shot, he said. Quote, it's a very intriguing image, he says. It needs more research. There are other theories he can't rule out, such as a high-flying wildlife and weather balloons without metadata from the footage and other information. Metadata would help him glean clues about the direction the plane was flying and the exact time of the sighting. A Federal Aviation Administration official said Thursday the agency has, quote, no reports from pilots about the mysterious incident. The flight number and time were not clear Thursday. Reyes didn't immediately return a request for comments. So, getting back into that, right? So that's the thing. Here's, and this is going to go really more into the topic of the show, right? Because like, what's the government's plan? We think we know what they're going to do, but you would think in a situation like this here, with these crafts so close to these commercial planes, that there should be, so on the conscience of those in the know, they should feel like maybe we should alert the public about this, right? Because it's a bad thing. It'd be a horrible thing to find out at 35,000 feet that these things actually interact with these commercial planes. And then going back, we know there are plenty of cases and reports of military pilots who have come across these objects and have reported interference with their electronics, kind of just shutting everything down on the jet, and also with private pilots. Private pilots have reported the exact same thing. So you got to ask yourself then, if it happens in those two cases, why wouldn't it happen with the commercial aircraft? If you ask me, I think it probably has. And, as somber as it sounds, it's possible if they interact with those commercial planes that they could cause a catastrophe. We know we've had many catastrophes that the FAA likes to go ahead and explain away by saying, oh, okay, this little small part failed, which caused this horrific accident, when in truth, it potentially could be as simple as what you're seeing here, which is interactions with craft that interact with planes in the sky. They definitely seem attracted to them. And lately, there's been a lot of footage of them trailing planes. We saw that with the president's plane leaving out LAX. They had that on the news where they showed the object traveling right along with the plane. Same thing that you find at a lot of air shows. Um, and and truthfully, the orb that I took a picture of in Reno, we were maybe a mile away, if probably less, from a major airport, the one in Reno. And then same day, right outside McCarran, which I think they changed the name to McCarran. I don't know. I forgot what it is, but it's a Harry Reid, right? Yeah, Harry Reid Airport, where they also showed these objects, or not, didn't look like this. It was definitely a different type of object, but still in all, just shows that they are attracted to things that fly. Now, whether that's just a normal response or reaction to seeing something in the sky and they just have to observe it, or if they are maybe asserting some sort of dominance, right? Saying stay out of the sky, right? Is that potentially what could be going on? Like, hey, we're here, you guys shouldn't be up here, and we potentially are just ignoring that. And the problem with that is that any of these things that happen within the commercial industry, you have the FAA, who are the gatekeepers to the data or the information, and we know that the FAA has been holding all sorts of secrets on it with knowledge on things that are in the sky. A lot of them are, trying to act like our sensors weren't calibrated correctly, so we weren't seeing these things before. But I think we probably know full well, as much as we see these things in the sky as just regular citizens, we know the FAA is seeing these things 10 times as much, and they're fully aware of the things that are up there. So interesting to see where this goes, and really is just more evidence that adds to the pot, that and this is why it's so important that we have this show, because it just shows the disdain, just the unwillingness to do what's right for the citizen, to kind of protect whatever it is that they're doing behind the scenes. So more to come on that. We'll kind of get into some more of this. Let me see what exactly we have going on here. Next story we're going to jump into, which I think is pretty interesting, right? Lou Elizondo's emails confirm ATIP. Now, as we remember, John Greenwald with the Black Vault had done some FOIA work, and it was uncovered that Lou Elizondo's emails had all been deleted, right? And it has been uncovered recently that I guess he had some ties with some of the trials or happenings of 9/11 and the prisoners that were being held at Guantanamo Bay, and his, the email chain that he had while in that specific role, right? And I guess what they were saying was, because he was in that role specifically, those emails should never have been deleted, and should be held for for perpetuity, for future reference, regardless of the ATIP stuff, which I guess they could try to get away with. But the fact that he was involved with the 9/11 commission and trials in Guantanamo Bay, that those emails shouldn't have been deleted. So come to find out, some emails ended up resurfacing. So they've been dragging Lou through the mud as soon as and it sounds familiar, right? Sounds like the whole Bob Lazar thing, how they went in and deleted his history, and now he has to fight. He's been fighting all these years to kind of validate himself. And they did that really right to Lou Elizondo, right in front of the world. Didn't really care that, how they did this or how it looked to the public. And come to find out, I don't know how John Greenwald was able to pull this out, but there was an email leaked that showed Lou Elizondo definitely had access, or was a part of ATIP, as the letter that we're about to jump into, or the statement that Lou Elizondo made, kind of shows that he was transferring power or transferring the duties that he held to someone else, and specifically named ATIP right prior to his resignation. So let me go ahead and get into this. We know our good friend Matt Ford, good friend of Spaced Out Radio with the Good Trouble Show, ended up breaking the story and kind of getting the statement directly from Lou. So let's go ahead and kind of look into that and see exactly what was said. So let me go ahead and get that up here. I'm going to read this out to you. So Lou's statement, per the Good Trouble Show, courtesy of the Good Trouble Show, stated, when people first inquired about my story, the Pentagon initially confirmed my role in ATIP and the focus of its efforts. Shortly after Secretary Mattis left the department, the Pentagon changed its tune by saying all my emails had been deleted. The same emails that would substantiate not only my claims, but many of those who were part of the ATIP effort, including one of its sponsors, the late Senator Harry Reid. Later, when confronted with the FOIA request, the Pentagon denied again the existence of any email or correspondence between me and other seniors within the department whom I was regularly engaged with until the day I left the Pentagon in 2017. Recently, one of my emails was leaked by an unknown person on Reddit. This time, when the Pentagon was challenged with the existence of the email, in this case, one that described the authorized transfer of ATIP leadership responsibilities to another senior member of the department and endorsed by the Secretary of Defense front office, they were forced to admit this email existed and was not deleted, as they previously claimed. Begrudgingly, when the Pentagon finally did release this email proving my role and participation in ATIP, the Pentagon decided to redact the mention of ATIP, citing FOIA exemptions. By this logic, they would also have to redact the name Arrow and any other office at the Pentagon. It should also be noted that the Pentagon's mouthpiece for this one individual within the Public Affairs Office, who has been given sole authority to handle all FOIA requests involving UPS, Arrow, ATIP, and specifically me. All this information is in the public sphere and can be easily verified thanks to the work of certain private citizens fighting for increased government transparency through the FOIA process. Simply put, you in Congress continue to be lied to by a few at the Pentagon who prefer to view you and the American people as, quote, sheeple. Make no mistake, the Pentagon Public Affairs Office has a long history of feeding misinformation to certain questionable journalists to mislead the American public, and that relationship is alive and well today and is in fact now legal through a new and disturbing policy of, quote, perception management. To add insult to injury, I was also notified yesterday that there may be a personal threat against myself and several other whistleblowers formerly associated with the UP effort for the effort for the U.S. government. As such, I would like to make this perfectly clear to the American people. I am not prone to accidents. I am not suicidal. I am not abusing drugs. I am not engaged in illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family members in the future, you will know what happened. Signed, Lou Elizondo, former director, Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So, yeah, how do you guys feel about that, right?
I tell you, from its size and its appearance, this thing came from outer space.
Let me know.
I even have reason to believe that there's some form of life in it.
I'm looking in the chat here. And yeah, that story seems to have gone quiet. Forget names. because I'm so anxious about forgetting them. It's weird. I put so much pressure on me to remember that I forget. FAA denied a request. Okay, so we're talking about the lady, the LaGuardia flight. Okay. Let's see. Moving down the list here. And welcome, Derek Galloway. Thanks for coming on in. Charlie Don't Surf. Thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you. And let's take a look here. Okay. Yeah. Cosmic Joe Chronicles. That UAP that we showed seems to be genuine for sure. Cosmic Joe Chronicles. Lou Elizondo is the same type of government misinformation guru that Stephen Greer is. Totally a UFO cockblocker. Okay. Hey, W. Decker, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you. Appreciate you supporting us here. Yeah, with that being said, I know. So I think what it clearly shows, if you look at it all, right, like we talked about with the first story, you have the FAA, who obviously is, obfuscating and hiding information. Then you have the actual Pentagon, the DOD, who is playing these games with Lou Elizondo, right? The emails are deleted when they're not deleted. He did work with ATIP, he did not. You remember when he first came out, they went on that huge smear campaign with Susan Go or Goff, or whatever you want to say, releasing information on state, kind of going against everything that Lou Elizondo was saying. And this was co-signed by Senator Harry Reid, right? So we know there's validity to it. We know he was there, right? We know ATIP really existed. So this kind of goes into the next story that we'll be covering with Sean Kirkpatrick, because it's like, I think if you would have to be blind to not see the misinformation and all this that's going on behind the scenes, the blatant lies. And I said this before, I said this last year. I think the government is really, and this is kind of the topic we'll be getting into later, that they've really drawn a line in the sand against us as humanity, saying we hold all the keys and we don't care whether you guys get disclosure or not. We won't abide by, the policies that you guys have set up in these NDAAs and these requirements. You see how they kind of jerked around the UAP report from last October, or the October prior. I think it was 2022, was supposed to be released, and they didn't let it out until January because they kind of thumbed their nose up at the public, right? So how can you force their hand, right? Because they get into controlled disclosure. We really want catastrophic disclosure when you look at it. And I think that's going to be pretty much the only way that we can get them, to bypass the hurdles that they are putting in place. So, I thought that was interesting. Definitely something that we needed to look at, and something that's happened lately. Like I said, I haven't been here on this channel in a while, so the story is about a week or so old, but it's still very important because it shows that potentially there are cracks within that power structure, and maybe there's something that comes along later, which we will touch later in the show, that could kind of bust that dam open with the government and force their hand in a few different situations. I don't know how you feel about that, but hey, Kurt M, thanks for coming on in. I appreciate you showing up. Let's see. Derek Galloway, Woo Riders DG, just found out recently Kirkpatrick has some patents with tech he created involved with craft. Maybe that's why he's so hush hush, doesn't want to lose money. Yeah, that could be something. But I think, with the next story that we get into, which I'll just go ahead and jump into now, with Kirkpatrick caught in a lie, right? I don't know, either Kirkpatrick is purposely misleading the efforts of the Congress in trying to get this stuff out and in trying to dissuade the public. Either he's blatantly purposely doing that, which I think is probably more likely, that someone has put him in the position or sat him in a room and told him that this is the script and this is how it's going to go. You never saw anything. Anytime these reports come up, There's no new evidence, and we're going to keep throwing the same statement out there that there is no new evidence of or any evidence of extraterrestrial life, when we know that it's blatantly incorrect because we see these things every day. So we knew the whole time he was lying. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But the way that it came out, right? A year ago, Stephen Greenstreet actually had a show that he produced on the Basement Office, an episode where he was covering Skinwalker Ranch. He had gotten to the final episode, which I think was episode 5, where he ended up speaking to Brandon Fugel. Now, they were pretty much focusing on Greenstreet's time at Skinwalker Ranch and, some of the stories that have been told behind the scenes of George Knapp, Lukaski, and trying to more focused on getting those claims validated, and also the science that's being done on Skinwalker Ranch, trying to validate that and I think that was really the focus. And this was really just something on the side where Brandon Fugel ended up admitting that in 2018 he was flown out by essentially the DOD to have some sort of briefing on Skinwalker Ranch. He was flown out on the taxpayer dime to brief a group of people on the activities of Skinwalker Ranch. And it ended up turning out that Sean Kirkpatrick was in the meeting. So as soon as that came out, I didn't see a lot of people paying attention to that statement, which I really think they should have, because it was a red flag. It was a year ago that this came out. No one spoke about this. I've been saying it for the whole last year, right? I've been saying as soon as that came out, right after the NASA hearing, then, he had made the statement that they hadn't found any evidence of extraterrestrial life, or, these craft. They're still trying to play the adversarial angle on what was going on here. But he had in 2018, he was at a meeting with Brandon Fugel. So we're talking about Skinwalker Ranch, which technically is, more the wooey side of ufology. So you would bypass bringing in all these other people, and you would jump straight to the guys at Skinwalker Ranch, and you don't recall that meeting. That ends up being the response. Like he didn't recall the meeting. This is the skeptic angle, saying, oh, he takes so many meetings, he would never remember that meeting. It's just like Science Bob said, this is a type of meeting you don't forget. You have thousands of meetings, as Science Bob has said, that the gentleman in the position of Kirkpatrick, with the clearance level that he has, that he would have just so many meetings within a year, thousands of meetings, right? But he did say that this would be one of those meetings that sticks out in your mind. So there's no way. I said a year ago, when that Basement Office episode came out, that Kirkpatrick was being disingenuous at best, really lying, truthfully. And then it's just so wonderful that Stephen Greenstreet followed up in this current interview and kind of brought that to the table. And it was fun to watch Kirkpatrick squirm through that, right? And give non-answers. It was fun to see that, because we know that he's been sitting here misinforming the public, and potentially just lying under oath and lying directly to senators. And I think that's pretty wild. Hey, Mikey's Toon Room, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you showing up. Alien Keeper, thanks for coming on in. So with that being said, we have some of the, Stephen Greenstreet rather did some updates on Twitter after this, right? Because Brandon Fugel said this in the interview a year ago, but he also ended up showing receipts. And that's my thing. I love some receipts, because you can't deny receipts. When receipts are shown, they are what they are, right? So looking at that, he presented this. This was a statement from Brandon Fugel after Stephen Greenstreet inquired about any additional information he may have on this. Brandon Fugel states, "I am telling the truth. On April 19th, 2018, my team from Skinwalker Ranch was asked to provide a confidential briefing in Washington, D.C. to the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and United States Armed Services Committee. Sean Kirkpatrick was at the head of the table, right? And so I can't blow this picture up, but you can see Fugel taking a picture with a couple of his guys and a couple of the Senate guys. Let's go ahead and get to the next photo. That's Sean Kirkpatrick at the meeting, sitting front and center, right? Science Bob pointed out that if you zoom in on this photo, you can see like the vitriol in Kirkpatrick's eyes, knowing that he's being caught on camera. So I think what this does, and then to come back now and say that this would be a meeting you may not remember. You don't recall that you were in this meeting, but you have made statements over the last few years that 2022, prior to 2022, you had no involvement with any UFOs or any interest or any of that. But this is 4 years prior to that. You're sitting there in the meeting. There's no way you don't remember this, especially with the type of things I'm sure they were talking about and covering in this meeting. There's no way this would be the one meeting that is different from the other thousands of meetings that you had. There's no way you don't remember this. You'll never make me believe that, right? And I think Kirkpatrick left office so quickly because he knew this would probably come out. And so, you know how different this would be if he was still sitting as the head of Arrow, you know, with this story out and with this new revelation out and this information out. I think he probably stepped out of office so he wouldn't have to confront this while in office, right? Because then it really looks silly. Right now, if he stepped away prior to this coming out, he doesn't really have to respond much to it. He can kind of just do whatever he's doing wherever he's at now. But it's funny because if you zoom in on this, look at this guy. Pure rage. That looks like rage. That looks like pure rage. And you've been caught in this meeting. You're there. You're there in a meeting 2018 Skinwalker Ranch. You were present. So you have definitely been involved in this subject. You definitely have knowledge of the things that people are seeing and things that are out there. And then when you step into Arrow, you have access to pretty much all the whistleblowers and any data that's been collected, right? Up to that point, it's information you can sift through, but you still come with the end result that there's nothing to see here, no evidence of ET craft. So one thing that I started to think about after this all came out is if you ever go back and watch Sean Kirkpatrick's interviews, just any interview, when he's talking about this subject, I don't know if that's his natural demeanor, if he's, he just comes across as either someone that's holding back information or someone that's really nervous to talk. I think I lean more towards maybe he was told something and he knows he has to follow this script, even if he doesn't want to do it, he kind of has to do it, and he's kind of begrudgingly making these statements in front of the camera. So I kind of think that's what it is. Maybe he's caught up in a little something, but at the end of the day, I think the end result is that the guy was lying. So, and he's been caught. So his credibility is out the window. And I've seen all these skeptics out there with their shows, and they've been praising and hanging on every word that Kirkpatrick said. Anytime, hey, Greg O'Brien, thanks for coming on in. I didn't see you there. Thanks for coming in, Greg. Anytime that he has been asked about this, he said that there was nothing to see here. Now, Stephen Graystreet did release another update here, update number 2. He went through the Skinwalker Ranch PowerPoint PDF that Fugel sent me, and the slide in the briefing photo above appears to be this page from the presentation. So it does seem Kirkpatrick sat 12 feet from a Skinwalker Ranch presentation, but doesn't remember it being about Skinwalker Ranch, right? And like I was just saying a moment ago, a lot of these skeptics have been praising Kirkpatrick, and anytime Kirkpatrick makes a statement, those skeptics say, see, Kirkpatrick said there's nothing to see, so There's nothing to see. And my whole argument has been, you get a guy like David Grush who comes out and makes these statements and kind of says he has firsthand information or he knows someone that had direct access to the program. You want to tear this guy apart. You want to pick this guy apart and try to find all the holes in this story and look into his 10 years in his previous life. But as Sean Kirkpatrick, on behalf of the government, which we know, and I think even skeptics know, that in general, the government is probably not to be trusted, but still they've been hanging their hat on every word that Kirkpatrick has said when he comes out and makes statements like there's no signs of extraterrestrial life. They slam dunk like it's a slam dunk. But that's why I'm so glad that at this point his credibility has been destroyed, and it's been shown clearly that he's been lying. So if he lied about that, now you have to go back and figure out what else has he been lying about. And we know as experiencers, people who have seen things and know people who have seen things, we know that they're there. So to say that they aren't is just a lie. We know that, right? So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on this story here. So this was update number 3 from Green Street. Said Brandon Fugel has provided me with the original source photo and the metadata, which indeed shows creation date of 4/19/2018. So bravo to Green Street. I mean, you know, I think he really had to take this angle because of that previous interview. It's out there. So if, and even I was watching this current interview, like hoping that he would go back and touch on that and bring this up. And it didn't seem that he was going to do it, but he did it at the end. So I give shout out to Green Street for doing that, because you were the one that caught Kirkpatrick in the lie. It was your investigative work that did so. So, hey, regardless of any other views that Green Street has about other people related to this topic, he at least did that. And I think that was a big win for ufology and for getting this message out there, right? And to show that the government just is lying. So nothing new under the sun, but I think just for those people who are like, who have that mommy daddy syndrome when it comes to the government, when their views are, the word has to come through them, right? And they hang on every word. I think this is more for them to realize that the government just lies all the time, right? Hey, Maggie M10, thanks for coming on in. I just saw you there. Appreciate you showing up. All right. And yeah, so I thought that was big. And I'm just glad that if any skeptic going forward continues to hang their hat on Kirkpatrick's words, that's just disingenuous, and they probably shouldn't be listened to. But I've noticed that in the skeptic community, they've kind of been tucking their tail on this one, and they don't really know what to say, because there really isn't a good defense on, with the excuse of he doesn't remember the meeting. You can't really back that up with anything, right? So I think this is one moment this year. This is actually a pretty big moment, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Someone needs to release something, or something needs to come out to kind of keep the momentum going. But I think this was a good win for ufology this year. So with that being said, Kirkpatrick lied. He lied. He's a liar. I've been saying this the whole time. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump out of the news and go ahead and get into our meat and potatoes of the show. So we'll be right back in just a moment here. Yeah, and this is normally where we do something like ask the chat. So I'll just go to the chat to see if anyone had made any comments about Kirkpatrick, because it's like, yes, right? Woo Riders DG. Kirkpatrick is just a minnow in ufology. We don't know the big fish, right? for sure there's somebody pulling those strings. There's no doubt. I don't think Kirkpatrick goes on his own, under his own mindset to make the statements that he's made. I think it's definitely someone talking to him in the back room. This is definitely obviously orchestrated. The government is up against something big, which is really the topic of this show today. With post-disclosure, catastrophic disclosure, what's the government plan? This so far has been their plan, which is to send guys out like Kirkpatrick, to have people behind the scenes who are involved with FOIA, delete emails and maybe only release or redact things that probably shouldn't be redacted, as John Greenwald talks about all the time. So if you look at it, there's a full-scale operation going on right now. There's a full-scale operation going on right now to stop the momentum of disclosure. And, that's why we have to keep doing what we're doing here and in other places where we keep having the conversation to kind of move the needle, right? And kind of call it out for what it is, because I think some people aren't doing that. And, Kirkpatrick should be rung through the ringer right now. He should not want to show his face again after this, right? Because when that story broke, it really just wrecked his credibility, and his words going forward shouldn't be as valuable to anyone, truthfully, right? So maybe he tells his tell-all 20 years down the line on, really what the story was, but I don't know. Time will tell on that. But getting into the big story here, because I think even the news stories we covered kind of goes into what it is that we'll talk about now. And that is going to be catastrophic disclosure, the government plan. What's the government plan? There's a few different ways that this could go. What they want controlled disclosure. And the way I feel about controlled disclosure, my definitions of control versus catastrophic is controlled disclosure is the government doing a slow leak or slow disclosure release, if that. I really feel like they're just trying to kick the can down the road, and they don't want to disclose at all, and they don't plan to disclose at all. But they're calling it controlled disclosure. The problem with controlled disclosure is that their goal is to make sure that if it did come out through them, that they still find a way to maintain a power structure on the other side of an announcement like that. The second problem with that is that a controlled disclosure is probably going to take the rest of your life and my life. So we wouldn't see a controlled disclosure within our life. That would be their plan. They would want to drag it out as long as possible. So that means this could go in, another 20, 30, 48. What has it been? 80 years since Roswell, 90 years, something like that. So 80 years, a little over 80. So you could definitely be, and you would definitely be looking at the same thing. Another 80-year run. We're gone. You know what I mean? Our grandchildren are getting up there in age. And then guess what they would do again? They would kick it down the road, potentially even again for another 80 years. They do this as many times as they could, just so they can make sure that when and if it did come out, they still maintain the status quo, the power structure that's currently in place. So catastrophic disclosure for me is catching the government getting caught with their pants down by some sort of direct extraterrestrial contact, where they just land or make themselves visible in the skies and kind of really make a statement that, hey, we're here. So I think in a moment like that, I don't know. I think the government for sure has a plan for what happens in that scenario. And that's kind of what we're going to go over. Like, what could they do? So tomorrow we wake up, their control disclosure is out the window. ETs have made themselves known to the world. What the government goes ahead and enacts their plan B. And it could be one of these things that we're going to go through. So one of the first ones, and this would be the hopeful result, the path the government would take if they were caught with their pants down, catastrophic disclosure. It would be, the hopeful outcome would be that they would show some sort of compassion in a moment like that. So even though they've been obfuscating and lying and holding a secret and holding this back from us for so long, I think the hopeful thing would be that they would definitely show compassion, and then they would come out and fully acknowledge everything that they know about the alien presence on Earth. So everything that they've been finding out over the years, all the results of the studies they've done, that they would come to the table. This is the hopeful outcome, that they would come to the table with this information, share it with everyone, share it with scientists, share it with the world, and say, hey, this is what we knew that they were here. We know they're here. This is what we think they're going to do. This is why we think they're here. And kind of sift through all the information, total transparency, right? Well, not likely to happen, but this is the hopeful outcome. And they could still, redeem themselves by listening to a show like this and saying, hey, yeah, maybe that's the route that we take. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we should consider that, right? Another angle on this would be the government demonstrates transparency, as I said before, both in the release of information and then also the brainstorming process, which would allow humanity to get involved in the decision making, right, of where we go. So they go against everything that they've done so far, and they actually sit down with the people once they provided this information and their previous knowledge of what's been going on, and they sit down and ask us, like, hey, what do you guys want? Like, how do you guys want to go forward with this information? When I say you guys, I mean humanity. So the government sits down with all of us. It says, here's all the information that we have. This is what we think. What do you guys want to do? Like, how do you want to go forward as humanity? This would be the hopeful thing, right? This should be literally what they should do if this were to happen. They should literally sit down if they wanted to regain the trust of the people, and then they would be completely transparent, and they would sit at the table and then try to include us in all the decision-making processes as it pertains to how we move forward with this conversation. And let me just see here. So I know I see some Greer talking here, and Greer's done his part in trying to move this conversation, but so shout out to him for that. But Maggie M10, are they waiting for us to do it for them? I just don't really get any of it. Let's see. Woo Rider DG, if they disclose, they lose everything. Bye-bye. Oil, bye-bye. Pharmaceutical, bye-bye. Slave system, bye-bye. Exactly. Right? And that's why we're going to get in some of the later scenarios here, is where it kind of gets kind of creepy, because people with power will hold power at all costs. And I think we've seen that. There's other countries that show examples of that say they'll press a button if it comes to them losing power. So I think we know how far some nations would go to kind of make sure they maintain power. So that's to come. We'll go ahead and cover that in a moment. Magneticus says plan B is for aborting. Okay. All right. I got you. That was a good joke. Maggie M10, I really wonder if the plan all along has been ignore it and it will go away. We'll be getting into that too, Maggie M10, because that's a possible scenario on how this could go. So let's see. Yeah, Juliana McGill, you're totally right. It would prove crimes against humanity, hence Project Blue Book Alternatives. And that's one of the things that I wanted to get is hashtag crimes against humanity. Anytime that like Kirkpatrick in the past, when he were to release a statement we know is untrue, we tag that hashtag crimes against humanity. And I think if that became a thing, and social media is so big in what and how the world does and views things, that if every post that was a blatant lie and went against the progression in humanity, we should tag that crimes against humanity. That's definitely something we should do. That could be a movement. So let's see, moving down here. Cosmic Joe Chronicles, the word compassion and the government is hilarious. They will never have compassion for anyone or anything. And you're right, Cosmic Joe. And that's why I'm going over these, right? Because this is the hopeful thing, right? Pie in the sky. We hope they would do this, but we know they probably won't. But, they listen to these shows. They have agents and that come in chat rooms and things. So as long as they hear these options and then hopefully there's a whistleblower or somebody that holds keys to the lock, right? That can go ahead and be like, man, I'm really thinking about my family versus my commitment to the government, and choose family, right? Because that's where the compassion comes in. Thinking on behalf of the government, you're right, no compassion, but we'll get into those other scenarios soon. Magneticus, military plus intelligence, two words that make no sense. Right. Woo Riders DG, chip system implemented, saw press conference. They say optional, but them guys holding press conference said businesses might not be optional for chip systems. Okay. All right. So there's something else. All right. So once again, so we're still on hopeful. This is the hopeful outcome. So hopefully they say, hey, this has been all going on. This is what we know. Let's sit down at the table with humanity. Humanity, what do you guys want to do? How do you think we should, go forward with interacting with these ETs, and what are the best options that benefit you guys as humanity? Pie in the sky may not happen, but that's hopeful. Another one would be under the hopeful category for me that looking at that the government would agree in worldwide peace and work towards uniting all of humanity as we ascend and embrace our extraterrestrial relationship as we prepare to step into a new age for humankind. Right? Sounds like a script, sounds like a movie script, the perfect ending, right? Where we forgive the government now because they've turned from being power hungry to more humanity focused and really caring about the direction of humanity and where we go, right? So that's that. So that's the hopeful outcome. We're going to get into the next one here. Now, this is where we're going to start getting down a creepy or dark road, right? Because this is the best case scenario here. Now, let's go into what's really a plausible outcome, like most likely, right? And this kind of touched on, I think, what Maggie was talking about earlier. So a possible neutral outlook, right? This would be a neutral outlook, and the government would act naively, right? Acting like they just learned about ETs in a moment of disclosure. Like, hey, we're just finding out about this too. We're just shocked as you guys are. Let's figure out what we're going to try to figure out what to do. We promise we'll do what we can as the government to make sure that everyone is protected. And this is just as shocking to us as it is to everyone who is seeing these crafts now in the sky. So this is obviously, once again, in the event that ETs have landed, made themselves shown or known, catastrophic disclosure. And then in that moment, the more plausible option is the government acts surprised as well. Like this is the first time that they have seen these things and that they are trying to figure these things out with us. We're seeing some elements of that right now, right? With NASA saying, oh, we don't know about anything that has happened in the past, but, we are focused on looking forward and looking into this and making sure that we get some answers when we know they already have all the answers, right? But I think this is probably the most plausible outcome. One of the next things I would think in a more neutral, outcome would be the government asks for time to sort things out and makes a promise to come quickly with the plan to engage this new revelation, right? So once again, they get to keep control. They get to say, okay, we're going to put a plan together for this, and we will bring the plan to you once we figured it out to engage whatever this is. So whether on a friendly level or a adversarial level, that we're going to make a plan, and then we sit in the balance and we wait in at the whims of their decisions and their talks in skiffs and behind closed doors, and we were subject to waiting to see what the plan is, right? I think this is probably one of the more plausible options, right? That this is probably what they do. So they act totally surprised, want to come with this plan that'll take 6 months or another year. And here we go, kicking the can down the road again, kind of right back in really where we are now. Pretty much not too different, except the revelation that ETs are here. And then the third option on this, with the most neutral, plausible option for a government plan, if catastrophic disclosure were to hit, would be we as humanity miss the opportunity to redirect our current path. This is one of the downfalls, right? If this is the case, that we as humanity will miss the opportunity to redirect our current path of self-destruction, which is like nuclear war, the poisoning of the planet, just the current state that we're in right now, which we know we're leading towards this essentially human extinction if we allow what's going on today to continue on the other side of disclosure. Then so we would miss the opportunity to redirect our current path of self-destruction and planet destruction that we are currently on. So that would be one of the biggest bumbles or the biggest fumbles on our back, right? On our watch for humanity. So if this were to be the case, 100 years, 300, 400, 500 years down the line, future humans would look back at this moment where we could have done something different and we didn't do it, and we allowed the current state of affairs to continue on the other side of disclosure. That would be the biggest blunder. We could never live that down, and it would be shameful, right? 500 years from now, they would look back on us like we failed, right? And so we can't have this scenario, even though this is probably the one that they'll want to play out if catastrophic disclosure were to happen, right? And then getting into what would probably be, I would consider, and actually, let me go into the chat before I move to the next one here. Let me just see. Yeah, Annie Perry. There would also be other governments making announcements in this scenario. Some may say they've known about it for years, right? And there, I'm as far as, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I think in that scenario, I think period, really, when it comes to this subject, that even though we have governments that are adversaries, that on this subject, they probably have a group of people in each government that communicate with each other on this. Now, it may not be at that presidential level, but it's, when we talk about the behind the scenes, the powers that be, the shadow government, right? So each country, I'm sure each major power has some sort of shadow government within it that handles these sorts of things, the secrets. And I'm sure they communicate with each other on, kind of what to do if something were to happen. And, at the end of the day, it's all about power. So their conversations are going to be, how do we stay in power? Those are going to be the discussions that they have behind closed doors. Like, if this happens, how do we stay in power? And that's why we're going over this today, because going into the next part, this is where it gets dark, because this is, I'd say, probably less plausible, but still very possible. And just imagine this, right? Because I think we make a big deal out of democracies and dictatorships. How really different are those two things, right? A dictatorship, communist country, they do things, they tell you what to do. They make rules that are usually go against go against the best benefit of humanity, right? In most cases. Then you have democracies where it appears to be free choice, right? But that's what magicians use, right? The illusion of free choice in order to make you feel that you are in control of your choices and your decisions. But we know, even in the freest country in the world, which would be here in America, we know that that's not the case. We know that even though the talk is free will and free choice, the freedom to do what you want, there are a lot of restrictions and limits on what we are actually able to do, right? Like we can't. We have to pay for water. We have to pay to have a piece of land, right? And no one owns the planet. No one owns the land that we sit on. These borders are imaginary, right? So all these rules that have been put into place in a democracy, a freedom. If catastrophic disclosure were to hit, think about this. In an effort not to lose the power advantage over the people or citizens, the fine line between democracy and dictatorship potentially could be crossed. I think there's a fine line between democracy and dictatorship. Fine line, and those lines, that line could get blurred depending on who's making the decisions, right? So if there's this deep secret government that doesn't want this to come out, and then if it were to come out before without them releasing it, they may go to drastic efforts to keep control of the situation, right? So, which would potentially cross a democracy into overnight, maybe a dictatorship. And the way I feel about that, or the way I would envision that rather, would be a government enacting martial law in the streets under the guise of a global threat to people by extraterrestrials, which kind of goes into the Greer thing, right? The whole false flag thing, right? So if they're like, holy shoot, the ETs have shown themselves to everybody. Everybody's going, the ontological shock is hit. We're seeing humanity kind of make this turn, and they're starting to think for themselves, and they're realizing they don't need us. Then I think these sort of things potentially could be on the table, because you just never know. We haven't been in a situation like that to figure out, but I bet you the last thing that any power wants to lose, or any government wants to lose, is the power. So you have to ask questions on how far would a country go to make sure they maintain that, right? And that's kind of where this comes in. So in an event like this, if this ended up being the scenario where, oh my God, democracy has turned into a dictatorship, what I would hope is we would be able to, in this time now, before this happens, would promote the breaking of NDAs related specifically to the secret of extraterrestrial presence, meaning we don't need to know government secrets. We don't need any of that, right? Just break an NDA if it's specific to extraterrestrial presence that doesn't, put a nation in jeopardy by what the information is being released. Then I would say promote the breaking of an NDA in a scenario like this, where dictatorship is crossed into, or democracy is crossed into dictatorship, because I feel like, the citizens or the people who are for this would stand behind someone who were breaking an NDA. You know what I mean? And if there's support there, then there's not a way. I don't think, especially if it's only information related to extraterrestrials, that they would really be able to do something to this person with all the people standing behind, because that person would be looked at as a hero, in a situation like that. So I don't see, if it's widely publicized in a democracy, I don't see a government, maybe pressing the issue with humanity standing behind a person like that. So I'm one for saying break NDAs if it's only about extraterrestrials in a situation like this. And then preparing either for benevolent or malevolent encounter, regardless of when disclosure confirmation hits, but prior to it taking place. So, like when, you know, these scenarios don't take effect until disclosure hits. So, so prior to disclosure hitting, we should be having conversations about how we would handle a malevolent presence or a benevolent presence, and really talk about both sides of it, and see, formulate a plan on how we would handle a situation like that. So I think we should do that, because if we have that conversation, catastrophic disclosure hits, at least we have a plan going forward. And just generally doing like what we're doing now, which is kind of spitballing and kind of you know talking out all the possibilities, because I don't know if we actually, when do we ever do this? When do we ever sit down and talk about how things could be, or the direction we would go post disclosure? So we just have to keep having the conversations that move the needle, and make a plan on what path that we would like for humanity to take forward. Because I think that if we get together as a unit, then we can shift or shape the direction that we go in. So at the end of the day, it ends up being the world powers versus humanity, right? So the questions would be, what should we do as humanity's path forward? What should we do? I would say, and you guys can chime in too, I'm sure you have ideas, but I would say keep pushing for this catastrophic or humanity-led disclosure. So stop being distracted by what the government says, or if this is going to come out in the next report, or are they going to add this to the next NDAA? Instead of focusing so much time and effort waiting for those answers, and really being disappointed at the end of the day. Because if you think of the last 3 or 4 times where we waited for a date to come and a report to come, I think we've been overall disappointed, and that will continue to go forward as long as you sat and waited for these reports for eternity. These reports would always come back disappointing, because their focus is not to let this secret out. Hoping that the government would show some sort of compassion and disclose before the ET's forced disclosure. This is something that I like, that I put out there often, because of the agencies that people say, tune into these shows. And if there was ever anyone in a position that can make a difference that was within the government, I would just implore them to think about their family, think about, their grandchildren, descendants down the line, who would be affected by choices that they make or don't make, right? And so finding that human side, because the government is made up of human beings, right? They just work together as a machine, which is the government. But if you take one individual away from that, then you may be able to tap into some compassion. Like I said before, promoting the breaking of NDAs related specifically to the secret of extraterrestrial presence, while standing behind those who are courageous enough to do so. Because it would definitely be, you'd be a hero, and it takes courage to stand up against the threats that the government puts behind NDAs, prison time, and ruining careers and things of that nature, right? And then keep having the conversations, like I said, to move the needle, make a plan on which path humanity is going to take forward. And I think that's really where we need to be. This has been a look at, just a look into, and I'm sure there's these, I just picked 3 because I wanted to pick would be the best, would be a neutral and most likely, and then what would be hopefully not scenario, which would be the one we just went over. So it could be bad, it could be good. I think, it's something we should be aware of, because if they don't want it to come out and it does come out, they're going to be in a situation where they have to implement their plan B, and we just don't know what that plan B is. It could be one of these 3 things, or it could be something we haven't even talked about, right? That's what this is all about. So getting out of that, we're going to go ahead and get into, I actually have a segment called Once Upon a Time in Ufology. And we're going to go ahead and get into that real quick as Once Upon a Time in Ufology. Here we go. All right. So Once Upon a Time in Ufology, and I'm going to hit the Ask the Chat question.
Ask the Chat.
Based on the scenarios that we talked about, and you can put this in the comments of the chat, which one of the scenarios do you feel like is the likely path for humanity? Which one do you think the government goes with? I mean, at the end of the day, do you think there's maybe something inside that could really get them to approach this a different way? Something to think about, right? So with our Once Upon a Time in Ufology, the story we're going to get into today is actually one that I haven't really heard of. And it's going to be the sighting, which is titled Flight 105. This happened in 1947, in between the Kenneth Arnold sighting and the Roswell sighting. So this is pretty interesting. Maybe you've heard of this, but the reason why we do this is for those who are just coming into ufology, maybe they don't know these stories, and we kind of go into history and look at some of the encounters that we've had here. So with that being said, let me go ahead and jump into the story here. Flight 105, 1947. So the Flight 105 UFO sighting occurred on July 4th, 1947, when 3 crew members aboard a United Airlines flight reported seeing multiple unidentified objects in the skies over the Pacific Northwest. A week prior, private pilot Kenneth Arnold had reported seeing similar objects nearby, a sighting that was followed by nearly 800 copycat reports during the summer of 1947. 4 days after the Flight 105 sighting, Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating that they had recovered a, quote, flying disc. That statement was quickly retracted, and it was put forward that the crash object was identified as a conventional weather balloon. A statement that would yet again be changed to the now official explanation being a crashed Project Mogul high-altitude balloon whose primary purpose was long-distance detection of sound waves generated by Soviet atomic bomb tests. The following month, on July 29th, an aircrew flying the same route also reported unidentified flying objects. The Flight 105 sighting was the first flying disc report from professional airline pilots. As a result of the sighting, Flight 105's Captain Emil Smith, an original saucer witness Kenneth Arnold, began a collaborative investigation of additional disc reports, including the Maury Island hoax. The Air Force ultimately concluded that the sighting was attributable to, quote, ordinary craft, balloons, birds, or pure illusion, which is what they always say. At 8:04 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, United Airline Flight 105 took off in a DC-3 from Boise, Idaho, bound for Pendleton, Oregon. In a sign of the times, on departure, Boise Tower jokingly suggested the crew, quote, be on the lookout for flying saucers. During the flight, co-pilot Ralph Stevens reported sighting an approaching light and turned on the DC-3's landing light to alert oncoming traffic. Stevens and Captain Emil J. Smith then reportedly observed what Smith termed as, quote, 4 or 5 somethings. Smith described the objects as, quote, smooth on the bottom and rough appearing on the top, but they could not say whether they were oval or saucer-like. One object was reportedly larger than the rest. The crew later witnessed what they interpreted as 4 additional objects. While airborne, Flight 105 radioed a report of the sighting to the tower in Ontario, Oregon. The crew reportedly witnessed the object for 45 miles, or about 12 minutes, before they disappeared, quote, in a burst of speed. Though the crew could not say whether they vanished by outspeeding the DC-3 or by disintegrating. Outside the cockpit, stewardess Marty Morrow reported seeing the objects. According to Smith's account, the 8 passengers on board had no view to witness objects, which are mostly dead ahead of the plane. So this is one of those ones that I really hadn't heard of. Maybe you guys have in the chat. You can let us know. But, this is definitely one that you should put on your put in your mental database if you have not heard of this. Let's see. This is a good thing to know. Kenneth Arnold's book is available on YouTube for free. It's an audio book that's excellent. I'm going to have to go ahead myself and go ahead and take a look at that. Maggie M10, I think it might be likely they're so concerned about, okay, this is on the previous topic. So let me go ahead and make sure we cover that. I think it might be likely they are so concerned about having to tell us they are completely powerless against these things and the fallout from that, or human ego won't allow them to admit it. Yeah, I understand, Maggie. And that's why one of those scenarios could be the possible outcome. So I think really it ends up being for us just to know that. That way we can prepare for either of those things. And then what do we do as humanity? Because we still have to be the ones to move the needle. Even if democracy crossed the line into dictatorship, we still have to figure out a way. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into our next segment, which is our science fiction, science fact movie of the week. And that is going to be a classic. That's going to be the movie Contact. So this is an awesome movie. Let me go ahead and give you the synopsis of this story. Dr. Ellie Arroway, which is Jodie Foster, working for SETI at the Arecibo Observatory, searches for extraterrestrial signals with her blind colleague Kent Clark and assistant Fisher. He discovers a signal from Vega containing prime numbers and a hidden video, prompting a government takeover and tight security. The signal includes schematics for a complex machine, leading to global collaboration to build it. Ellie faces political and personal challenges, including rivalries and romantic tensions, as she strives to unlock the mysteries of the signal and the machine. So that's a science fiction, science fact movie. The reason why we do these is because, like I say, a lot of these things for me in ufology started happening to me, within the last 2 years. And even going back even further than that, right? 2017, Lou Elizondo comes out and says, hey, these things are real. There's a program. We've been collecting things. And under that new revelation, when you go back and you start watching some of these older movies that were considered science fiction, and you look at them through this new lens, they just hit differently, right? It just feels different because you see now all the plausibilities in the things that you're seeing in these movies, knowing that a lot of this stuff is actually real. So that's why we do that. And also to help educate, those who are new to ufology and kind of giving you like some homework, right? Giving you a little bit, and then you can go and research the rest of it on your own. So that's the purpose of this show. And that's what we've done. So let's go ahead and get out of our science fiction to science fact movie. And what we'll do here is get ready to kind of bring it home. So yes, definitely. So great show, great first show back, right? Season 2, episode 3 of the Social Dig. If you've come over from after hours, you see me there, you haven't come here before, then you kind of see what the different vibe is here and kind of how we cover stuff here. So I definitely want to thank the people that did come in and join us for the live. Like I said, the lives for this channel has been a little wonky because, I have so much to do over here that, some of this stuff doesn't get finished in time. So, but we'll be picking back up on this. We got to get the Scientology part 2 back in, which we will be doing soon. The reason why we do this is we do this for the positive progression of humanity. So you look out in that sea of people there. You look out in this crowd. Any of those could be you. Any of those could be me. This represents everyone across the globe. And the reason why we have these conversations is to move that needle and redirect humanity, because we're on a collision course with self-destruction as it is. And it's really up to us in this moment to come together to figure out how we move forward and where we go. So that's a big deal. Let me go ahead and jump in the chat and see who is here. Maggie M10, Terry Hall stepped in the building. Thank you for coming in, sir. Do appreciate you showing up tonight. We got Magneticus in the building. We got Maggie M10. Thank you for coming in. We got Lovey Love. We got Derek, Woo Riders DG. Thanks for coming on in. And Bim Jim, thanks for coming in. We appreciate you showing up. Fast Hemi left a little early. I appreciate you coming in, though. Really, I do. It all helps to move this needle. Annie Perry, thanks for coming in. Cosmic Joe Chronicles, we do appreciate you showing up. It takes all of us to have this conversation. Juliana McGill, thank you so much for coming in. I don't want to miss a soul. Going back here. Greg O'Brien, yes, sir. Thanks for coming in. W. Decker, thanks, sir, for coming in. Alien Keeper, we do appreciate you showing up. Let's see. Kurt M, thank you for coming on in. And Charlie Don't Surf, thanks for showing up tonight. We appreciate you. Let me get back here. And Joanne, thanks for coming in. Eternity Eternal, appreciate you. So with that being said, like I said, we have conversations to move the needle. It's going to take all of us, even the tough conversations. We still have some of, those conversations to have. Like I said, Scientology Part 2 coming up. Make sure that you guys do not miss that one. It's going to be a banger. And jump in the archive and check out Part 1. Kind of get yourself up to speed with what it is that we're doing there. Outside of that, it has been a pleasure working with you guys tonight. Remember, this is the phone number. Put it in your phone. Give me a call anytime. Talk about your experience. Just say hi. Sometimes that's nice too. With that being said, thanks for coming into the Social Dig. You guys all have a great rest of your day. See you over there at Space Out Radio. You guys take care.